Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good to see all of you here today. All right. Awesome. We're going to wait, as we always do, until about 12:05 before we officially get started with today's Lunch and Learn. And in that 5 minutes, I'd love to steal your guys' ear and talk to you a little bit about the post-event networking page that GlobalPDX has up and running. It's really an excellent way to keep the conversation going even after today's event, particularly with some people that you think might be able to support the work you're doing, forward your mission, and really just help you be a better global change maker. So I'm going to share that, but rest assured, it's just a few-minute presentation. Can everybody see my screen okay? I'm getting some nods. Awesome. So as you guys all know, GlobalPDX is Oregon's hub for global change makers. And we're so excited to keep things going even through the pandemic with virtual events like this one, with like our podcast, and like all of the programming we're doing. If you have any questions about that, check out our website or shoot me an email. And as you guys know, GlobalPDX members get a lot of additional benefits, even though events like this Lunch and Learn are open to the public for a small fee. GlobalPDX members can join these Lunch and Learns for free. They happen every month, sometimes even twice a month. And soon we're going to be looking at rekindling our development drinks in person at a local pub. And you'll be in on that as well for free as a GlobalPDX member. And you also get discounted tickets to our annual conference, which we're planning and is in the works for 2021. So lots of great perks there. In addition, if your organization is a member of GlobalPDX, of course, all of your affiliated staff and individuals also become members themselves. But you also get to do a lot of sort of amplification of your message and your mission through the GlobalPDX newsletter, through our social media, and across our website. And then the big thing that I'm going to be talking about today is that GlobalPDX members get access to the member portal, which is where we store all of our resources. It's where you got your free event code to this event for today. It's how you can create your individual member profiles, which I'm going to talk about really briefly. And then it's how you can network with fellow change makers like all of the ones joining us right here. So this is what your profile looks like if you're a GlobalPDX member, but you haven't input any information about yourself yet. So on that left-hand side, kind of a gray screen, and there actually isn't a way for people to connect with you yet if you haven't put in any information. Over on the right-hand side is an example of what your profile would look like with a little bit of attention. You've got a photo in there. You can talk a little bit about your organization, your role at that organization, and then link in any of the social media or professional networking sites that you use. Most people use LinkedIn, and that's how people can message you after this event. You can also join the LinkedIn GlobalPDX group and sort of make those connections last. So I want to show you super quick how you log on there, and then as I said, I'll be passing it over in just 2 minutes to start the main event. If you go to the GlobalPDX website under membership, you'll see a tab called Member Portal. If you click that, it'll ask you to log on, or if you've never logged on before, that's quite all right, but you have paid your membership dues. You go down to the bottom there and click I'm a member, but I haven't registered for the site. You'd fill out this quick form, and keep in mind, if your organization is a member, and that's how you yourself have your membership, make sure you note which organization you're affiliated with. And that'll take you into this GlobalPDX member portal. It's just that easy. You'll see at the top here, that's our monthly code to get you into events for free. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the post-event networking, which is in that red circle there. If you were to click that, it'll take you to this page. You can then select which event you were at. So we're going to say we were at today's event, the interactive workshop on the power of evaluation. And once you click there, it'll take you to a page that looks a lot like this. You'll be able to see other Global PDX member attendees. You'll be able to see the names of the attendees who aren't Global PDX members. And it also houses all of the resources from today. So if you think, wow, that presentation was great, I want to see if Allie gave us permission to use that afterwards, this is right where you look. It'll also direct you to the session recording that we are taking of today. So if you wanted to share that with others, you would have access to do so. So let's say we clicked on my profile here. It would take you to an exploded version, all the information about me, and you could click my LinkedIn and make connections there. You could see what organization I work for. Again, I'm Jennifer Miller. I'm the initiative lead at GlobalPDX, as this says. And you can really start keeping your connections alive and connecting into our community. And then a quick reminder that where that red circle is at the top right corner of the page, that's how you would click to edit your own profile once you're in that member portal. All right, that is all from me. And I think we have everyone joining us. So thank you so much for being here today. What we love to do before we start the event is go around this virtual room and just ask everyone to introduce themselves by their name, their organization or area of expertise, and what attracted them to this session today. Of course, I'd like to mention that if you would rather not say anything, you absolutely don't have to. You can either let me know right now or you can shoot me a message. I know that for some introverts, it actually detracts a lot to have to speak and it's kind of stressful, so we're happy to accommodate you there. So without much further ado, I'm going to start calling out names and just ask for a really brief introduction. Jacob, do you mind if we start with you?
Hey everybody, I'm Jacob Dodds. I'm a current master's student at PSU, and I'm doing some work for GlobalPDX as well. And I'm really excited to see this presentation.
Thanks so much, Jacob. I'm going to pass it over to David.
David Newman. I'm the founder of the Rafiki Village Project. We're a relatively new nonprofit working in Tanzania. This is right up our alley. What we need to learn how to evaluate our projects, and that's something that we're working on, and so that's why I'm here.
Thanks so much, David. It's good to see you, and I'm envious of the background you have. It looks like
it's a beautiful day. This is my backyard here in Portland, but it's nice. It's nice to get out here.
All right, I'm going to pass it over to Pete.
Hello, my name is Pete LaRosse. I'm the COO for Whole Child International. It's a small nonprofit focused on children. We work in El Salvador and are trying to expand into other areas with intermittent success. I like monitoring and evaluation just as a personal interest. It's something that, I'm here for personal reasons. This is actually not job related. I just like it.
Awesome. I don't think I've ever heard someone say that before, so I like to hear it.
I love to hear that. I love it too.
Thanks so much, Pete. I'll pass it over to Anna.
I'm Anna Garwood. I was formerly the executive director at Green Empowerment, and now I'm a program director of youth programs at Growing Gardens. And I feel like I've been doing evaluations for a lot of years, but I feel like I need a little bit more systematizing to it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Anna. Good to see you today. I'll pass it to Lauren.
Hey everyone, I'm a program officer with an organization called Spoon, and as part of my role is evaluation, so I think I just always looking for further professional development and honing my kind of skills in that sector.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lauren. I'll pass it over to Samara.
Everybody, my name is Samara Winfield, and I'm one of the program managers at World Oregon, and I do a lot of the education programs, but I also wear the evaluation hat for the organization. So I'm always wanting to learn new skills and looking forward to meeting other folks who are in the same space. So nice to meet you all.
Great to have you here, Samara. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Grace.
Hello, everyone. I'm Grace. I'm also a PSU student with Jacob in the Masters of Public Administration program. And I'm here today because program evaluation is something I want to learn more about, and I'm really enjoying my classes about analytics, and I'm excited to learn more today.
Thanks so much, Grace. I'll pass it on over to Dana.
Hi, I'm Dana. I'm on the board of the Rafiki Village Project. And like David said, we're hoping to incorporate monitoring and evaluation in the work that we do. And I finished my MPH program last year, and I took a program evaluation course, but I'm really looking forward to like digging back in and like brushing up on those skills. So I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you, Dana. And finally to Tara.
Hi, my name's Tara Weichel, and I work for UNICEF as a consultant based here in Portland. And I've worked with a lot. I was interested in today's session because I've worked with a lot of evaluation teams and alongside, I should say. And so I'd love to get to know more specifically some of the skills and frameworks and stuff like that. Thanks.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you here. All right. And with that, I'd love to pass it over to our speaker of this month's Lunch and Learn, Allison Shruilla.
All right. Hi, I'm Allie. I'll give a little bit more in-depth bio for you in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to share my screen. It's great to hear about all your organizations and your experience. It's cool to see some other evaluators in the room. So I hope that I will be able to give you a little bit of a different perspective based on my approach to evaluation and how I like to do things. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this. Here we go. Oh. All right. And so before I get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. I do want to make this a little bit interactive. I know that, as Jennifer said, we all kind of enter at different points in our day, different energy levels, different levels of comfort speaking or participating. So I definitely encourage you to participate however you are comfortable. But I definitely encourage you to participate in the polls, speak up in the chat, and if you want to, speak up and ask a question, share a story, I would love to hear it. I think it makes things a little bit more interesting for everybody, and it also gives me an opportunity to make sure that what I'm talking about is resonating with you and giving you the kind of information that you are hoping to learn. So we didn't get any accessibility requests before the session today. If you do have one, just reach out to us and make sure that we know that so that we can make sure that we take care of that. And so the agenda, I'll give you a little bit more information about me. I'll talk a little bit about my approach to evaluation and why I think it can be really powerful to integrate into your work. It sounds like many of you are already doing that, so that's good to hear. And I'll talk a little bit about my perspective and maybe some of the new ways that you could start to approach some evaluation or incorporate it into your work. I'm going to share some tools and walk you through the approach that I use in my practice and some of the techniques that I use in my work. And we're going to use an example that I'll walk you through, and then I'll give you some I'll give you some information, how you can get in contact with me, learn more about this kind of stuff, and potentially work with me if you're interested. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. And so I just want to start out with a land acknowledgement. I'm based in New York City, which is Lenni Lenape land and known as Lenapehoking. I did a little bit of research and it looks like Portland has a number of tribes in the area, but one of the overlapping tribes is the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, which is a tribe in itself that brings together a number of the other tribes. And I did some super basic research on it, but I encourage you to do some more in-depth research on that if you haven't already, and learn a little bit about the indigenous lands that you're working on. And as this is a global community, thinking about the indigenous lands and the stewards of those lands throughout the world in the different areas that we're working in. For myself, I was born and raised on Potawatomi Menominee land. And so when I do my land acknowledgement, I always do a personal practice of acknowledging those folks. And also in a global context, I like to bring the reminder that the practice of land acknowledgement is a very US-centric practice that comes out of a history of colonialism and colonization. And when we're thinking about that in a global context, it has a lot to do with power dynamics, systems of oppression, and the way that land is used and honored and cared for. And so when we're thinking about land acknowledgement in a global context, thinking about both the historical and the contemporary relationship that we as humans have with the land, as well as power dynamics between different humans on that land. And so a little bit more about me. I am an evaluation consultant. This is if you see a little black tail, that's my cat. Her name is Elfie. So I'm an evaluation consultant. I've been doing evaluation consulting for about 11 years. 6 of those have been within my own consulting firm. I've worked with organizations from small nonprofits, large nonprofits, international NGOs, primarily in Latin America, in El Salvador, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. I've also worked with schools, hospitals, state and local governments, and some private companies. And my background is in education, public health, and arts and culture. My own background is as a nonprofit staff member and a youth worker and a community organizer. So my evaluation background is, I know evaluation often seems very kind of technical and nerdy and very accountability focused, but I actually came to this from a perspective of youth work and community organizing. I got a master's in public policy from the Humphrey School at the University of Minnesota. And through that, I actually took an evaluation course. And through that experience, realized how powerful evaluation could be to be one of the tools that people on the ground can use to support their work. And so that is what informs my approach to evaluation and the way that I do my work, and the techniques that I'm going to walk you through today. Some other little pieces about me is that I've also served on a number of boards. I'm currently a board member of a national organization working on systems change and the New York Consortium of Evaluators, where I run an independent consultants group. And I'm very involved with the consulting space, both in evaluation and other nonprofit consultants. And so I say all of this to say that all of these pieces are kind of what comes together in my approach to evaluation, and the idea that evaluation is a tool that can be one of the underlying supports of your organization's work and the impact that you ultimately have. And so I want to start out with a conversation. So I'm just going to ask the question, when you think about evaluation, what comes to mind? Or what do you think of when you hear the word evaluation? And I would like you to put your answers in the chat or speak up. And it doesn't have to be like the right answer or anything very technical. Just kind of think of what comes to mind, what kind of words, what kind of activities, what kind of things are you doing in your organization? I just realized when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So let me do this.
I can also read for you, Allie, what I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I beat everybody to the punch. The first thing that I thought of was my boss hearing what they want to hear. Not at this job, but in other jobs I've been at. Evaluation sort of always felt like an opportunity to give just whoever was in leadership sort of the buzzwords and the results that they wanted. Maybe not always a total reflection of what was really happening. I see a couple other answers coming in, so I'm just going to rattle them off. But if you want to read your own answer, feel free to just jump in here. Dana says assessment and improvement are what comes to mind. Grace says measurements. Jacob says statistics and assessment. And Pete says data drive, informed decision making, evidence-based, expensive. And Samara says logic models.
Yeah. And so this is really, very kind of the most typical, the most standard way that evaluation is seen, I think, in a lot of organizations and in my own work, as I work with organizations on their evaluation, and as they call me in as a consultant, is that the most common thing that I hear is that it's a requirement or somebody's asking you to do it. Usually it's attached to a funder or some kind of funding relationship. Sometimes there's another kind of organizational entity, or maybe it's just your boss who's involved, who's telling you how to do this. And you're like, oh, okay, so I'm have to do an evaluation. And then you think maybe I'll hire a consultant to do that, or I'll figure out how to do it on my own. What does that even mean? The other thing that I see a lot is that people want to be data informed. And this is one of the things that's become a lot more common, especially recently. But it's the same kind of nebulous, not quite sure. We know we want to be data informed. We think it's a good idea. We're not quite sure how to do it. I guess we'll figure it out. And in my experience, most evaluations are very isolated from the rest of the organization. They're focused on a specific program or a specific kind of area in the organization. And then back to the last point, they're focused on reporting. They're focused on the ultimate results that you're gonna take out. So, you know, one example is I am starting to work with an organization right now that, you know, when I started talking to them and asking them what they're doing in terms of evaluation, they started, you know, listing off a lot of things. They started listing off, you know, they've got an assessment here and a survey. They've worked with consultants to do evaluations. But all of their activities, all their things they're doing are very disjointed. There are a lot of pieces. They have an assessment that they're required to do by a funder that's not even actually appropriate for their population that they're working with. And so I call a lot of these things drop-down evaluations, especially if you're working with a consultant. You kind of drop in, you do your little study, you write a report, and then you leave. And I'm not knocking this type of evaluation that's very program specific and very robust, which I imagine a lot of you are doing. I think that I think those types of evaluation are really important, are really valuable, but when they're not integrated into all of the rest of the systems of the organization, there's a lot of missed opportunity for you to be able to learn about your work and be able to use evaluation and evaluation techniques to really support your underlying work and everything you're doing. The other issue that I have with this, I think partially from my background on like community justice or community organizing and social justice, is that it's very top down. It's very, you know, the power dynamics are someone's telling you what to do and you're just kind of doing it, whether or not it's serving you. It could be really expensive, and a lot of evaluations they could cost a lot of money. And it could be, you know, basically wasting time and money doing something that's not supporting the rest of your work. And so my approach to evaluation, and where I think evaluation is really valuable, is when you do start to integrate it into your underlying work and your work processes in a way that's not a huge burden, in a way that's not taking a lot of time, money, resources to do a big thing that's not affecting the other pieces of your work. So through evaluation, you can create a culture of learning. You can create systems that are supporting the work that you're doing and your staff by learning, you know, more about your impact, more about the processes, more about what's going on in your organization. It gives you more power over your story, over the information that you're getting. So if you're doing evaluation in a way that's integrated into your organization, you're learning about things that are really meaningful for you. They're really, like I said, supportive of the work that you're doing, instead of being a response to what somebody is asking you to do or somebody is telling you to do. And when you do integrate it into your work, you can cut down on that extra admin time or that extra work that goes into doing an assessment that's not even giving you any information that's useful for what you're doing. And when I start to talk about it this way, a lot of times people will get a little nervous or start asking me questions like, well, but you know, we do have to respond to our funder. We do have to do what they say. And yes, you do. I'm with you there. The beauty of this approach is that when you do integrate evaluation into your systems, you do the work for yourself and then you tell them about it. That's what I like to tell people. And so you are showing your commitment to learning and growth. You are showing them that you are doing something that's really valuable. You're showing them that if your funder is worried about their money and where it's going, you're showing them that you are making choices in your work based on data, based on information, and based on learning. And then you can demonstrate the way that you're growing over time. you can certainly do this through, you know, drop down evaluations and like coming in and doing a series of them, but it can be a lot more helpful and a lot more powerful if you can integrate it into your work. And then the last one, the little square over here, is documenting why you made changes and choices. And this is a big one right now. I recently spoke to an organization that is early childhood education. They do like preschool programming. And when the pandemic hit, they had to figure out how to pivot. And like a lot of people, they were thinking about moving to online programming. And they went to their families, they went to the parents that they were serving to ask them what they wanted. And they discovered that their families did not want another online program. They didn't want another thing for their kids to do on the computer. But they really missed the connection. They missed coming in and talking to people. They missed hearing from the teachers. And they missed that community connection. So instead of investing all their time, money, resources into developing online programming, they put their efforts into developing a way for people to network online. And so one of the things that I'm going to talk about is the way that evaluation, you know, usually when we think about data, we think about our numbers, we think about participant counts, we think about our survey outcomes, and, you know, all of these really standardized things. But I like to work with my clients on identifying the creative ways that we can see data. And so in this example, their data was those conversations with their families, right? So they could go back to their funder and say, hey, this is why we made the choices that we made. This is why we did what we did, because we did this evaluation and we collected this data, and this is what we found out. So I'm going to have a little pause and look at this chat before we dive into the next piece. But the next piece, I'm going to walk us through that approach and how I like to integrate evaluation systems into organizations so that it is more fluid and more supportive instead of so outwardly focused. So as I look at the chat, does anybody have any questions, have anything that they would like to say? Yeah, David, if you don't evaluate, you have no idea if your work is having a positive impact. Definitely.
I have a question. Just
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just focused on evaluation. Are you going to discuss the relationship between, say, monitoring versus evaluation, or how that plays into this? Because I mean, in my experience, the monitoring is more a part of that's something that happens more regularly than an evaluation. So that's something that will be more part of the culture. So I'm just curious about your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say that monitoring is a piece of evaluation. In my opinion, it's one of the tools that you can use as part of your evaluation. When I think of evaluation, I think of some of the underlying work, answering questions. I myself am a qualitative researcher and a qualitative person, so my work tends to happen more in that space. And I think monitoring tends to fall a little bit more in the quantitative space. But I think when it comes to monitoring, I think of that as one of the things that you can do. That's one of your pieces of data that you can then take as you're doing your evaluation. So if you're creating an evaluation plan, these kind of numbers and statistics and metrics that you're monitoring will be part of that. Does that answer your question? And you can feel free to reframe it and ask it again as we go along if you don't feel like that's that I'm getting to that point. The process that I'm going to walk through is definitely a little bit more qualitatively focused, but there are pieces in here where you can integrate some more of that quantitative data. So this is the part where it gets interactive and I start to lead you through some of these techniques. So the work that I do is really based in questions and answering questions. And a lot of times when I start to work with an organization, they've already jumped to the data collection. They've already jumped to the reporting. They've already jumped to, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we need to say, rather than this is what we want to know. And often in my work, I need to pull things back a little bit and start to encourage them and help them define their questions so that we can then move forward. And the reason this is so important is because if you don't have your questions defined properly, you might be collecting data that isn't answering them, that isn't really assessing your impact, or you might be collecting numbers, monitoring things that don't actually have an impact on your underlying work, and you find out that you have all this data, but it's not answering these big questions that you have. And so as an interactive piece, I'd like you to pick a question for your organization. It doesn't have to be one of your evaluation questions right now. In fact, I do encourage you to just think about something that, what's a question that you have about your work that you would like to have an answer to. And then go ahead and put your question in the chat. And I have a couple of examples here that are pretty common questions, typical questions. Some of them are a little bit more more evaluaty than others, and then I'm going to work with a sample question, which is, I'm going to pick an example organization, which is actually based on an organization I used to work with. And that is, I used to teach an after-school program. And so in this example, I haven't worked with this organization for a while. So it's totally made up. But imagine that if I were working in this role right now, I would be asking, how can we make sure that we are keeping our youth engaged as we and they transition back to in-person activities? So we can see that everybody's transitioning back to in-person. We're kind of trying to figure out how to do it. We're not quite sure. And so we have a lot of questions. And that's the big question, example question that I'm going to work with. Does anyone want to share their question? I had the chat. Here it is. Okay, so I'm seeing, does increased knowledge translate to change in practices? What are the longer term impacts of our current youth programming? Are there better ways we can be structuring our assessments so that it's less negatively impactful on our customers? And then what impact are we having on our members? Cool. And so the next question for you is, what are you currently doing to answer your question? Really simply, and again, don't necessarily think about evaluation activities, just think about, how are you getting answers to that right now? What kind of resources are you looking for? Who are you talking to? What kind of data do you see in front of you? Maybe you're going to webinars to learn things. Trying to gather responses on a survey. So in my example, these are the things that my organization is currently doing. So we talk to youth. We have our programming. We do it every week, a couple times a week, maybe with some groups. So we talk to the kids. We kind of get a little bit of feedback. We talk to them about their lives, what's going on. So we can kind of gauge some things that are going on with them, how they feel about their programming. We talk to parents, right? So sometimes they hop onto the Zoom. Sometimes we'll have a conversation with them. So we're getting a little bit of information from them. Sometimes we hear about, what they think. And then we talk to our program staff. We have, staff meetings, we have conversations. And so we get a little bit of information too in our staff meetings. We've been talking about this a lot because it's on everybody's mind. And we're not quite sure. And we're all kind of asking this question. So I'm seeing from you guys, observing students, surveys of teachers, partner conversations, streamlining the process, pre and post tests. Okay, and then this looks like a question. What parts of our program have the biggest impact? Doing focus groups. Cool. So my example is pretty, what do you call it? it's kind of in the moment. It's very casual. It's not very specific. It doesn't have a huge eye on evaluation. And so in this organization, so the next question is, where are there new opportunities to gather information? And one of the things that I really like to work with is, what are you already doing that could help you gather information? And so I work with my clients often to help them identify the areas that you might not think of evaluation activities, like the example that I gave you earlier, that could actually be evaluation activities. And I think in a lot of times they come out as, where are ways that you could dig a little bit deeper. So in this example that I gave, what this organization is going to do to evaluate this a little bit more deeply is they're going to design an activity to gather information from their youth, and all program staff are going to lead the activity. So we're always designing new activities. We're always updating our curriculum and our content and designing new things. We're going to just take some of that time to design a specific activity for this purpose of gathering information on this question. We're going to hold a parent event. I know this is a pandemic example. In non-pandemic times, this would be, a parent event where everybody comes in, we have food, we have stuff for the kids, we have stuff to do. And then they will hold a conversation on this question. So it doesn't have to be a super structured focus group. It could just be a conversation. And then we're going to reach out to our school contacts and community partners. So these are people that, again, we're in conversation with all the time. We might make this one a little bit more structured and send out a specific email or create a survey, something like that, to gather some information from them. And then we're going to dedicate a staff meeting to talk about our findings. And so again, we have our staff meetings every week. We're always talking about it. We're just going to take one staff meeting and dedicated to this. We're going to look at these pieces, which are our data that we just collected, and then we're going to have an analysis session to put it into researchy terms. And yeah, we're going to put a little bit more time into that. And so these are basically really day-to-day activities that we're doing. We're not doing anything big. We're not doing a big project. We're not spending a lot of money on this. Maybe we'll hire somebody or talk to somebody to kind of get this all together, but it's not going to be a huge cost. And we're just going to integrate it into our day-to-day work and put a little bit more intentionality into it. Intentionality is a word that I like to use a lot in my work, in terms of, you can take the activities that you are already doing and just infuse them with some evaluation intentionality to get a little bit more information out of them that you might not otherwise. And so what I would like to hear from you all, it sounds like you're all doing some evaluation activities already. Like, you're already doing some things like surveys and focus groups. I'm really interested in hearing how you could start to incorporate evaluation in a way that's very natural, in a way that's very integrated into the types of things that you're doing in your organizations. That's not an extra add-on, that's not going to cost a lot of money, that's not going to be this separate thing, but is something that is really supportive of the work that you're already doing. Sorry if you can hear that. There's a motorcycle outside my window. And how you can start to include evaluation as a day-to-day activity and part of your everyday work. Does anybody have any ideas? Want to share a story or a comment?
Yeah, I was going to share a little bit. So the work that I'm doing at World Oregon is right now running some focus groups for the different programs we run. And then because we're all using Zoom, it's really easy to do now, and people are just maybe a little bit more accessible than they would be to jump on a 45-minute focus group with 4 other people. And then I kind of do these listening sessions with staff members, and it really kind of, you bring it into a staff meeting, and it's really good data to share with your colleagues, to have direct information coming from stories from participants. It's been very effective. I think it's a pretty easy thing that's not very labor intensive, and really rich data that gets in kind of deeper than just a survey.
Yeah, that's a great story.
I'm curious your experience with working with children. So my current role, I feel like kids are like, yeah, we're having fun, but it's like how to then wrap that up into And so what, like, I think of like the logic models of like, okay, these kids are obviously like having fun doing something or learning about specific items, but then how do you aggregate that into the big, like, and therefore our organization is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that comes out in some analysis. So you might work with the youth to gather the data, and you might do something super creative where they draw pictures and they tell you, how do you feel in our program and what do you think about it? And then you have them tell you the story. You can kind of take that as qualitative data in an analysis capacity, and integrate it, I think, with some other things. So a lot of, the techniques that I talk about connect a lot with capacity, right? So if you have an evaluation budget and you have the capacity to do a lot of different pieces and to be doing something like that with surveys and with other things, I definitely do recommend doing that. I do recommend doing the more researchy stuff if you have the capacity. But if you don't, I think that's still really valuable data and is still really rich information. And I think it's kind of the approach of the way that you look at it and the way that you see it as data. So as a qualitative analyst, our data is never perfect. Like, our data is always stories from people. And so I think in an example like that, that's how I would see it. These are stories from people, and this is how we got that information. There's a interviewing technique called it's called listening session, but it's a very specific type of listening session where you don't come in with a strict protocol and you basically just allow the person to like guide the conversation, and you really just listen to the words and the things that they're doing. That could be something to look into in this capacity where you don't have the ability or are not interested in being very strict about the protocol and the way that the interview or the data is collected. But then once you have it, looking at things like words that people are using and feelings that they're expressing and things like that. Does that answer your question or help?
Yeah, thanks.
And so then this might be a good segue into the next piece, which is then once you have this kind of data, this data that may not be the most rigorously collected or analyzed or done through a rigorous research process, it can still serve as data, and it's still something that you can talk about in your grant reports or proposals. And so this is an example from my example situation that this organization could use either in a proposal or in a report. And it's basically, I'll just read it. It says, to evaluate our outreach, we designed data gathering activities with youth, parents, teachers, and other community members. Our data showed that XYZ approach would support students as they transition to in-person activities, and we've made adjustments to our programming following this model. So this takes something that's pretty like simple activities that they've done. They've integrated them into their day-to-day work. They're not doing huge research projects, but they've turned that into data. And I think that, there are certainly people who are huge advocates for a rigorous research process, and like you have to do things XYZ way. As you can probably tell, I'm not one of those people. I think that this kind of data is really valid, and it gives you really valuable information, and it's just how you use it and how you approach it and how you talk about it. And I think in some ways how you defend it when you're talking about it, talking to someone about it. So if someone says, well, why didn't you do an RCT? Like, why didn't you do all these surveys and stuff? And you say, well, because this was practical for our population. This is how we gain some really important information and how we can make our decisions. And you kind of learn how to talk about it. You learn how to back up that data. Oh, I forgot to do our first poll. I completely forgot about it. Jennifer, could we do our second poll? It sounds like a lot of you have worked with logic models or theories of change, but I'm gonna put this poll up. The next piece we're gonna talk about is the logic model or theory of change. So just let me know, do you use them in your work? Yes, no, or I don't know. Answer.
Seeing a lot of yeses come in.
Can you show the little graph?
Yes, I think as soon as I end the poll.
Yeah, I am a data nerd. I do like to see all of the graphs. So lots of yeses, a couple of nos, and some I don't knows. So this is probably what I would expect from this group, considering that many of you are working already in evaluation or monitoring. A lot of times when I work with clients that don't have an in-depth experience with evaluation, and I ask them if they work with a logic model, I get a lot of answers that are like, oh, I think so, maybe I have to go find it, I'm not sure. It's this kind of like, it's this thing that they've done, but they're not really aware of it. They don't really use it. And I think for this group, this presentation is something that I do usually with people that have less experience with evaluation, and then I talk to them a little bit more about logic models. But I think that the way that I view my logic models and the way that I like to work with my clients with logic models is to see them as a living document. And so a lot of times a logic model is kind of this activity that's done. It's like homework. You kind of do it, you fill it out, you turn it in, and then you never look at it again. And I think it can be a really valuable tool to come back to as a grounding exercise, or as something that can support your work and your conversations that you're having. So we're in a pandemic. We're kind of maybe transitioning out of a pandemic, or at least to another stage of our pandemic. You know, we're not quite sure what's going on. A lot of things have changed. And I'm still working with organizations that have gotten funding, built their logic models in 2019. And so your logic model isn't going to look today like it did a couple of years ago. And so you might take it and you might look at it and say, oh, wow, like we thought we were going to assess these things. We're not doing it. Maybe we should find a way to do that. Or maybe you say, you know, this isn't relevant anymore. We don't want this on our logic model. And it's, you know, a way to kind of come back to those conversations and those ideas of the way that you want to assess your work and the way that you want to measure what you're doing. And so, click. This is your super standard, like classic logic model. I know that they can look a lot of different ways, and I've seen some really beautiful and amazing creative ways to see logic models that I think are super cool. I like to start out with this one because it's very linear, which can be problematic in a lot of contexts, but I like to start with it because I like the linearity of the way that it kind of draws you through these points in the process, and it brings about these kinds of things that you want to pay attention to, and it helps you see the way things relate to one another. And so I am curious from you all how you use logic models, what kind of value you see in them, where they apply in your work. I would love to hear some stories or feedback either in the chat or in the live. Or if you don't, or if you've decided you don't want to use them for some reason, I would love to hear that too. Program design. How is it grant applications? Yeah. Very good to get everyone on the same page in terms of what we do, where we want to be, and how we're getting there. Yeah, and so that's an example of how a logic model can be really generative and be really helpful in, you know, the underlying support of your work. With partners to ensure that we're all on the same page. Cool. So you guys are sharing them with people, actually using them. I love to hear that. And this is the super simplified logic model, which I'm sure that you guys are like, where are your numbers? I know they're not there. This is the kind of quick and dirty logic model that I threw together for my example program. That if anybody would like me to walk through the logic model process really quick, I can do that. But it sounds like you guys already have that knowledge. Yeah. And so then,
Allie, real quick, we got one more comment that I think is pretty cool. Samara mentioned that it's a great tool for staff to get a pulse of the past, present, and future.
Yes, I think that's a great example, especially as we look towards different futures, right? So the short, medium, and long-term outcomes, we're kind of drawing from, what do we want to see in a year to what do we want to see in 10 years? And it kind of puts things into perspective. And so these are just my big quick tips for planning for evaluation for the future, which I would imagine that you guys are doing some of these things at least. I always recommend to include evaluation in your budget and to write it into your grant proposals, because if you don't put it in there, chances are it will be left behind. And I think evaluation is one of those things that really often seems like it's not a priority, right? Like it's not the thing that you want to focus on. It's not the thing that it's on the top of your list. And so it can really easily be left behind if it's not included specifically in your funding. And then I do always recommend working with an evaluation consultant or hiring a staff member. It sounds like a lot of you are in that role, which is great. A lot of organizations have staff members that might have a different role, primary role, but do have evaluation expertise that they could really harness that to get some of their evaluation perspective from. I'd never advocate for like adding a pile of load of work onto somebody's desk, but if there's a way to redistribute work with someone expertise that you already have on your staff, that's a really great way to start to incorporate evaluation. And even if you do have that staff, it can be helpful to hire a consultant as well to have an outside perspective or a different perspective, maybe a different area of expertise. I work with a lot of organizations that have evaluation staff or even an entire evaluation department. Like I said, I'm a qualitative specialist. So I've been hired for a number of projects where they have a robust evaluation staff that does all the statistics and all the quants and all the numbers, all the monitoring. And I'll come in to do some focus groups and to integrate some more qualitative perspective in there. I've also come into organizations to help with this perspective that I'm talking about now. So the organization that I told you about earlier that has all the pieces everywhere, they have a lot of staff that has evaluation expertise. They have some really great knowledge on their staff. They're bringing me in to give them an outside perspective and to help them pull all these things together that they're kind of like all over the place. They want something that is more systematized, that is really supporting their work instead of just constantly gathering information that they report out that isn't helping them. And so these are some of the ways that you can potentially work with a consultant or integrate evaluation into your work. A lot of I definitely recommend talking to an evaluation professional as you write evaluation into your grant proposals or your budget. I have worked with that did this incorrectly, and then because they didn't talk to someone with evaluation expertise, and then so whatever they wrote into their grant proposal was inappropriate for the questions that they had. I worked with an organization that, it ended up costing them a lot more money to do what we really needed to do to get that evaluation. So I always say talk to someone with that expertise before you write it in, because it could end up costing you in the long run. Or you could just end up not getting the information that you really need. And a lot of consultants will provide this type of support for free or very low cost. I'm one of them. Depending on the amount of planning, the amount of work that goes into writing into a grant proposal, I sometimes will do it for free if it's just a little paragraph, maybe for a low fee if it's like a plan. But if it, I always encourage people to talk to us and to include a professional into writing these into your grants if you're going to do it. I really stress it because I've seen it go bad a lot of times, and because it's so easy just to talk to us and try to get some feedback. So that's the end of my presentation. We have a couple of minutes for questions or for some more discussion. Here's some more information about how you can get in touch with me. I do have a blog and a newsletter. There's my email down here. Feel free to get in touch with me, connect with me on LinkedIn. We have the GlobalPDX profile where you can connect with me. This is my website. And I do provide free consultations. So normally I cap my consultations at 30 minutes. I'm going to give you guys the link to the 60-minute consultation that I like to provide just for, special situations like this. So if you have more questions about this approach, or you are working on a proposal that you'd like another perspective on, or questions about qualitative stuff, I didn't talk about that today, but I have a lot of expertise in interviewing and focus groups and qualitative analysis. So I can support you in that too. And I'll put that link in the chat, but other than that, I'll open it up for questions. Any ideas? How did this go for you? I feel like this group has a little bit more evaluation expertise than the type of organizations I usually talk to. So I'm interested in how this resonated with you.
I have a question that's there's programmatic evaluations. Do you also look at sort of operational? I don't want to call it an audit, but you can evaluate operations as well. Is that something that you look at?
It is, yeah, in terms of, understanding how staff are working together and kind of the implementation evaluation questions. Yeah. Yeah, I actually had a really interesting project that I worked on recently that I was hired to do a qualitative evaluation. And I was hired to gather participant feedback through doing some focus groups and some interviews. And as we were doing the evaluation, we realized that there were a lot of questions about the process and about what was actually going on in the program and what staff were doing. And I ended up shifting my project to doing interviews with staff members to find out what was actually going on and how the program was being implemented, because there were a lot of questions about that. And so I ended up doing a whole kind of, it was the same project, but we just shifted it to answer those questions. Do you find that organizations prefer quantitative data evaluation over qualitative, or do you see people seeking out both? I see people seeking out both. I think that there's a heavy focus on quantitative because I think it seems accessible and commonplace. So people really, I'm sorry, I don't remember who asked this, but so people, surveys are really common. Everybody knows a survey. People kind of get it. And so I see, like, I will get asked to write a survey, and this is one of the situations where I need to pull things back because I'll get hired, or someone will, schedule a consultation with me to hire me to, they'll be like, we want you to help us with our survey. And we find out through a conversation that they're not survey questions that they're asking. They're asking qualitative questions. They're asking questions that they could get a better answer to in a different way. I do use a mixed methods approach. So almost everything I do has a quantitative and a qualitative aspect to it. And I think maybe part of the answer to this question is, like, people don't always know what they want, especially in terms of evaluation, or they don't know what they need, because evaluation is a fairly misunderstood field. And there aren't a lot of people, not a lot of organizations don't have people on staff with evaluation expertise. And so they kind of have an idea in their head what they want, but they don't, because they don't have the background in it, they might be wrong, basically, or they might be asking the wrong questions, or they might be looking for something that there's a better way to get their answer to. Does that answer your question? Or do you want to
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think also as a, I won't say that I'm not biased as a qualitative researcher. I always kind of go that direction, but those are the questions that I gravitate to as well. But I also think that they're the things that often get left behind as we're so focused on gathering our numbers and our metrics and our surveys and, those quick things and those things that you're like, how many participants did we get? How many people did we outreach to? When you dig in a little deeper, the questions are really like, how are we affecting people? Like, how are we inspiring people? Like, what's happening with them after they leave our programming? Those kinds of questions that take a little bit more of a qualitative approach.
Thank you so much, Allie. What a really interesting session. And I get the sense that we're just scraping the surface of the sort of the deep dive that you tend to do. So I really appreciate you giving us this sort of overarching look. And thanks so much to all of you for joining us here today. I know we just hopped over time, so I want to make sure that I let all of you get to the next meeting that you have planned. But please do keep in mind Allie's very generous offer with her 60-minute session. We'll also include that link in the post-event networking page. And feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear how we're doing as GlobalPDX with Allie's last comment in mind. We're always looking to connect you better, to make sure we're bringing you the events you want, and to make sure we're supporting your professional growth. So thanks so much to all of you, and we hope to see you at the next Lunch and Learn.